Hello, thank you all very much for joining us today in person and online. I'm Austin Kennedy with Senator Sinema's office and serve as the president of the State Society of Arizona. We are very excited to partner with the Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations on this event, and I'm honored to be joined by an expert panel on a very timely topic. I would like to take a moment to thank the University of Arizona for hosting us and to our wonderful sponsors for this event, Rio Tinto, the Nature Conservancy, LG, and First Solar. And a big thank you to our reception sponsor, South 32. Thank you all for making this happen. Before I hand it to Claire, I'd like to thank Tina Waddington, the Executive Director of the Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations, who has been a wonderful partner in crime for this event. Thank you for all your work on this. Now I'd like to introduce my dear friend, Claire Sheckler-Merkel, who is the president of PCFR and the senior director at the McCain Institute.
Thank you, Austin. It is absolutely wonderful to work with you again and share the podium today. You have two ex-McCain staffers in front of you, and it's nice to be back in the game. I am, as Austin mentioned, Claire Sheckler-Merkel, and I serve as president of the board of the Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations, and I double as a senior director for Arizona for the McCain Institute as well. Welcome to today's Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations program in partnership with the State Society of Arizona in this beautiful University of Arizona building in Washington, D.C. It is a unique program for us. It is a first for PCFR to co-host a program outside of Arizona. And I am delighted to see so many PCFR members here, as well as old DC friends. And we thank you for your time and attention today. I'm also pleased to have so many of our members joining us virtually online from home in Arizona. Today's program is another perfect example of PCFR's mission in action to provide forums that explore critical foreign policy issues and build enduring international connections. The war in Ukraine and continuing shifts in great power competition have put supply chains on everyone's mind. I look forward to learning from these experts about Arizona's opportunity to lead the clean energy economy. It is my pleasure to introduce Pat Risner, Global Mining Company South 32's Hermosa Project President. Pat is a good friend and supporter of PCFR in Arizona. He and his team in Arizona have been instrumental in helping PCFR achieve our mission and bring timely and relevant programming to our community. He brings decades of experience in mining and comes to South 32 after 25 years at BHP. Please join me in welcoming Pat.
Thank you. On behalf of South 32, I would like to welcome everyone to today's event as well. We're very pleased to be a part of the event, Arizona Leading in the Clean Energy Supply Chain. It's very much what we believe we're doing with the Hermosa project. We appreciate everyone joining both today virtually and in person. My name is Pat Risner, as was stated. I'm the president of South 32's Hermosa project. Hermosa is a manganese and zinc mine development in Santa Cruz County in southern Arizona. Excuse me. Our mine will produce key raw material inputs into the electric vehicle battery and renewable energy supply chains, which is why we think this topic is so important and pleased to be a part of the event today. I too want to first start by thanking the University of Arizona, the State Society of Arizona, and the Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations for organizing and hosting the event. They've done a fantastic job of bringing together today's program. I also appreciate the privilege to be able to provide some comments before we introduce video remarks from our senior senator from Arizona, Senator Kyrsten Sinema. As you all know, and from our work with the senator, she's very committed to be at the forefront of ensuring that we grow domestic supply and investments in the production of critical minerals, the manufacturing of electric vehicles, batteries, and other technologies that are going to be essential for us to tackle our climate change initiatives, strengthen our national security, and help ensure our energy independence. We only need to look so far as the supply chains for manganese and zinc, the products we'll produce at Hermosa, for a good illustration of why this is so important. We've not mined manganese in the United States, or really in North America for that matter, for more than half a century, going back to the early 1970s. 97% of the manganese metal in the world comes from China. We're about 87% dependent on foreign sources for zinc. So as we continue to look to address climate change, these create security challenges for a country. As you know, Senator Sinema is committed to addressing our over-reliance on foreign sources of critical minerals, which pose national and economic security risks for our country. She's also committed to boosting strong labor, environmental, and tribal consultation standards in how we do it. And we're proud to bring the Hermosa project on in a way that we think is going to lift those standards. We're contemplating the project as the first carbon neutral mining development in the world. We're located in Santa Cruz County, where unemployment's twice the state average and per capita income is 40% below the state average. We believe we can deliver a significant economic uplift with over 1,600 jobs and the economic output equivalent to about 20% of the current economy of the county. Senator Sinema has recently sponsored the Mining Schools Act, the Good Samaritan Remediation of Abandoned Hard Rock Mines Act of 2022, both of which are aimed at investing in Arizona's jobs future and ensuring we have a sustainable and responsible mining industry. As she knows, our state is uniquely positioned to play a key role in addressing these challenges. The Senator recently hosted a similar event in Phoenix, so today's event is a continuation of that important conversation that brings together all of the relevant players, and we're honored to be a part of it. With that, I will step aside and hand over to the video remarks from our Senator Kyrsten Sinema. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person today. Thank you, State Society of Arizona and the Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations for hosting today. I appreciate our expert panel for joining in person and all of you for participating in today's panel discussing Arizona's role in the renewable energy supply chain. We all know the effects climate change has on our state, and I'm proud to see Arizona leading the way in the use of clean and renewable energy technology. Our transition to clean energy is no easy task, and it will require tremendous resources and actions to reach a net zero emissions scenario by 2050. But Arizonans are never afraid of a challenge or to tackle something new and innovative. Our state is at the forefront of our country's renewable energy transition. Arizona could provide the whole renewable energy supply chain, which is critical in addressing climate change and expanding economic opportunity, independence, and resilience throughout our state and country. Now more than ever, Arizona's leadership in renewable energy innovation is needed. With the growing threats from foreign powers attempting to undermine America's energy independence and constantly increasing gas prices undermining families' economic security, Arizona stands ready to be the responsible and innovative steward to a stronger and more sustainable future. That's why when I was leading the negotiations, writing and passing our bipartisan infrastructure law, I was proud to include historic investments in electric vehicles, clean energy, and climate without raising taxes on everyday Arizonans. These investments include over $11 million that Arizona will receive this year for electric vehicle infrastructure, in addition to $500 million available in grants for electric buses. Additionally, Arizona will be eligible to receive historic investments for battery manufacturing and recycling, critical minerals mapping and research, and improvements to the permitting process for critical minerals production that will support important projects across our state. I also expect more investments coming to Arizona for this important infrastructure build-out in the coming years through our Department of Transportation formula funding. Our work is far from over, and like every Arizonan, I see the window of opportunity here for economic growth and environmental resilience. That's why I've already personally convened and asked leading clean energy developers, manufacturers, mining companies, and environmental groups to help develop real, common sense policy solutions. Arizona leads the way, and I'm proud to count on all of you as partners in this effort. And now, I'll turn it over to Austin, who will introduce our renewable energy guru from my team, Chris Phelan. Thank you so much for being here, and I wish you a productive discussion.
From the International Energy Agency, the role of critical minerals in the clean economy, the agency found that total mineral demand across 6 technologies, solar, wind, EVs, battery storage, electricity networks, hydrogen, and other low carbon generation, the minerals demand for across all 6 of those will increase 6 times to reach a net zero scenario by 2050. Now, this is a massive increase that can be pretty hard to fathom. It's even harder to imagine how we can achieve this increase in a sustainable way that provides economic opportunity and security to Arizonans. Again, as the senator said, or will say, Arizona is poised to lead this work in the transition, from the mined raw materials to batteries, to EV and solar manufacturing, to recycling and reclamation, to responsible environmental stewardship. Arizona is at the forefront of all of these. The state is proud to be home to companies working at the forefront of these areas, such as South 32, a sponsor, producing critical minerals, hopefully in the near future, Lucid producing cutting-edge electric vehicles, and Core Power providing next-generation battery technologies. And with that, I'll go ahead and introduce the expert panel we've gathered here, who will help provide insights, help inform the policy discussions that Senator Sinema has started up with the last meeting in Phoenix, and that are really currently taking place in Congress and with the White House. I think everyone knows this is a pretty hot topic in the city. So I'll introduce everyone. First, we have Vicki Pesce on the far right, who's the mining executive for the COO of Rio Tinto's Copper Group. We have Samantha Sloan next to her, Vice President of Global Policy at First Solar. Sitting next to her is Patrick Clifton, Vice President of Corporate Affairs at LG Energy Solution. And lastly, Jason Albritton, Director of Climate and Energy Policy for the Nature Conservancy. So I want to thank all of you for being here. And with that, I'll turn the first question over to you, Vicki. So again, according to the International Energy Agency, annual demand for graphite, lithium, and cobalt expected to grow massively. And along with that, there's currently 110 pounds of copper in the average electric car. And that's not even to speak of the demand that will be needed to build the projects funded by the Senator's bipartisan infrastructure law. Fortunately, the United States does not rank in the top 3 countries for global production or refining of any of these materials. Globally, China produces 40% of the world's refined copper, 60% of the world's refined lithium, and 65% of the world's refined cobalt, and 90% of the world's critical metals, rare earths. Vicki, given Rio Tinto's position as a global company, what are some of the best practices you believe can help responsibly onshore this production capacity to the U.S. and North America more generally?
Thank you, Chris. I'll start with the U.S. first and then go to North America. But the United States has an amazing opportunity to increase production of copper, lithium, critical minerals right here at home. The way we do it, though, is we have to think differently. How do we bring on new supply quickly? These proliferation of decarbonization technologies have come online in the last 10 years really fast, right? Solar, wind, electrification of the grid, electric vehicles. So we need to bring on new supply relatively quickly. And I think that it will only be filled by an all approach, but includes increasing recycling. We want to make sure that we are expanding existing operations, so brownfield, new mines, all of the above approach. So here's how we're thinking differently and how we're challenging ourselves. So first, in Utah, we have the Bigham Canyon mine, which has been in operation for over 100 years. We just spent $1.5 billion in an open pit expansion. So that'll take our operations to about 2032. That'll bring on consistent supply to meet the demand. And the other thing associated with Kennecott is we are one of 2 remaining primary copper smelters and refineries. So we can actually produce final product here in the United States. So that's just maintaining consistency. From a new supply, we have to think differently. Rather than open pit operations, can we go to underground? So we do have an underground opportunity. We've got about 20 million tons of 3.6% copper, about 1.6 grams per ton of gold. And so we're in the phases of completing engineering for that, and that would bring on new supply. I would be, you can't talk about copper's role in decarbonization without mentioning critical minerals. And there is no other mineral that has as many critical co-products associated with it. You usually only produce them as a result of a byproduct of copper refining and smelting. And so there are, I'm happy to say that in May, we produced our first tellurium from our tellurium production plant. We did this in partnership with the United States. So whether it's the USGS Critical Minerals, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, as well as partners like First Solar and 5N Plus to help make this happen and come to fruition. I think we're now about number 5 or number 6 in the United States in terms of production of tellurium. So we're pretty happy about that. And I'll turn it over to Samantha to talk a little bit more about tellurium. Third, we're investing in new technology to produce battery-grade lithium from a waste product. At our boron operations in California, it's been going on for about 90 years. And we realize we have all this waste rock that has commercial quantities of lithium. So we've commissioned a demonstration plant. We're producing about 10 tons per year of battery-grade lithium, and we're just finalizing the optimization to take that to 5,000 tons per year of battery-grade lithium, and that will supply the needs for 70,000 electric vehicles on the road. So if I move off of that and think more broadly to Canada, one of the things that we've really tried hard to do is aluminum is another critical mineral. Can we produce it in a way that is net zero carbon? So we've partnered with Alcoa to produce aluminum with an Ulysses project that is the first of its kind net zero aluminum. And aluminum from our operations go into the Ford F-150, so the new electric Ford F-150, your new Apple iPhones will also have this aluminum in it. So again, going back to challenging ourselves, how do we think differently? The way we get new supply on fast is by getting more out of existing.
Great, thank you, Vicki. And moving on to Samantha. It's great to have an Arizona company make the trek here. I know you're based in North Carolina, but the company was founded and is based in Tempe. So thank you, First Solar, for being here. I saw in your 2021 annual report that one of the factors First Solar takes into account when deciding to make a manufacturing investment in the country is, quote, access to or the ability to build a cost-competitive supply chain to support the sourcing of raw materials and components. So Samantha, what are some of the most important raw materials and components for your business, particularly as you work in integrated utility-scale solar storage generation continues? And what success have you had in developing domestic supply chains to support those needs?
And it's a really hot question, Chris. And maybe I'll start with a little bit of background for those who are less familiar with First Solar as a company and what we do and why it's so different from the other kinds of solar that you hear a lot about. If you could imagine our simple advanced semiconductor, think of it as a glass sandwich about the size of shower doors, smushed together. And in between those two shower door sized pieces of glass is this tiny, tiny little piece of semiconductor material that's about 3% the width of a human hair. Part of that is tellurium. The other part is cadmium. The beauty of what we do and why it's so important that we're part of this conversation together is that the two fundamental components of our semiconductor, which is unique and the only commercially viable semiconductor that's not crystal and silicon based in the world today, they are both byproducts of what we're talking about here today. Tellurium is a byproduct of copper mining. Cadmium is a byproduct of zinc mining. And so the more we can drive the raw material, the more we can drive the refining and smelting of those domestically, the more that we can benefit directly. When you think about our largest piece of our supply chain, it's glass, because it's a shower door size piece of component times 2. That's domestically sourced as well. We have outfits in Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois. Even their raw materials are coming from the US. We get their sand from Michigan, soda ash from Wyoming. We view ourselves as really a coast to coast supply chain driver. Last year, we spent $1.5 billion domestically on our supply chain. We are serious about growth. We're serious about doing it here. As some of you know in the audience, we are in the process of building our 3rd facility in the US. It'll be our 6th and 7th globally to produce 6.6 gigawatts of solar right here at home, which will bring us globally to 16 gigawatts by the end of next year. And we're not done. Some of you, like Cora in the audience, know that we are quick to talk through what we want to do on expansion. How quickly we want to get there has a lot to do not only with the supply chain, but also with some of the policies that are going on and hotly debated right now in this town. The beauty of our semiconductor, besides the fact that it can be domestically sourced, it's also a beautiful sustainability story. In addition to the byproduct nature of its sourcing, we have the ability to recycle it. And not only do we recycle the glass and the other components that they get used in other applications, but our semiconductor can be recycled up to 90% of the semiconductor to be put back into our system and can be recycled that way 41 times. So if you think about a useful life of a module that's out in a utility scale, we're talking 45 plus years of useful life times 41. None of us, none of our grandchildren, none of their grandchildren are going to be around by the time we're done with that first bit. That is circular economy. That's what we can do together. And that is what differentiates the US from just about everywhere else in the world. We think about things from the beginning on how we can make sure we can do so in a responsible way, in a sustainable way, and certainly in a just society way. Here's one more thing though. When we talk about what we need, you heard Vicki talk about Kennecott. That's 10% of the, I think it's about 10% of the US copper. And if everybody's lucky that the resolution facility opens in Arizona sometime, that'll bring them to about 25% production of copper in the US. But half of the world's copper is refined in China, no matter where it's mined. So when we think about supply chains, it's not just the sourcing of the materials, it's where can we also bring it back, the refining, not just the recovery, the refining, the smelting, and then the transformation into the powders like the ones we use, CadTel. We have a facility that can do that substantial transformation in Ohio. We do about 2 gigawatts of raw material cadmium, raw material tellurium to turn it into CadTel powder. But we don't have enough raw material to continue to grow that at the same time that we're expanding capacity here. And if you think about the investment that it takes, we can do for the relatively inexpensive cost of a few $1 million, triple our transformation product from 2 gigawatts to 6 gigawatts in a very short order. But we need that raw material to be coming in from the US or nearby countries, ideally from North America. Vicki hit on this as well, but I want to leave you with one last thought on this question, which is, as we think about byproducts, and certainly the revenue line and most of the discussions going on in the mining community are not focused on the byproducts and critical materials like tellurium and cadmium. And I want to point out to those, and Pat, I want you to hear this. The more we can invest and allow mining companies to put your mining tailings back into the system, it's additional revenue stream. It boosts your sustainability story immediately, and we move forward together in enabling the clean energy transition.
Thank you, Samantha. I think those are all great points. Next, I wanted to turn it over to Patrick with LG, and first take the opportunity to welcome LG Energy Solution to Arizona. I don't know if everyone saw, but they announced about a month or two ago a $1.5 billion investment in Queen Creek in a new battery fabrication facility. So we're really excited to have the company in Arizona. It's great news, and I think speaks to the points that the senator and I have been making. So as a global company with a significant experience in battery manufacturing across the world, it'd be great to hear more about the company's experience co-locating supply chains like the ones we were talking about today and that Samantha touched on a little bit. In particular, I'm thinking about the company's work in Indonesia. How do you see this expertise translating to Arizona? What enabling policies can be implemented to ensure that processing capacity exists to lessen over-reliance on foreign sources? And what are any opportunities that you see in this space?
Thank you, Chris. We are very excited. LG Energy Solutions is very excited to be a new resident of Arizona. LG Energy Solution has been in the U.S. for quite some time now. Actually pioneered the EV market in the United States. Been there since the early 2000s. R&D focus and first manufacturing facility in Holland, Michigan, and also have operations through a joint venture with GM in Ohio and Tennessee and Michigan as well, and are glad to bring this experience to bear in Arizona. And so, like you said, with respect to your question, with our project in Indonesia, LG Energy Solution, along with a number of other Korean companies, and in close cooperation with the support of the Indonesian government, have recently formed a consortium, in effect, to build a mines to manufacturing electric vehicle supply chain. So LG Energy Solution made a significant investment. We'll be working alongside with mining companies, and ultimately the project will handle the entire battery production process, from the smelting and refining to manufacturing precursors, cathode materials and cells, and assembling the finished projects on Indonesia. So, what does that mean? I think it's a good example of a good story to tell in terms of how, we can secure and form a stable and secure supply chain, when it comes to the raw materials of the battery manufacturing process. And although, we are new in Arizona and look forward to beginning production in a couple of years, LG Energy Solution is very much committed to finding partners and other opportunities to hopefully replicate, diversify, and localize supply chain around our manufacturing investments. Obviously encouraged by this conversation today and fellow panelists here. And I think, though, it's going to take the support of the government, as you mentioned, and along with industry. So in terms of policy making, I think there are a couple of things that we can look at. A sound approach to creating favorable conditions for companies like LGES and others. When it comes to funding, obviously the bipartisan infrastructure bill is a great foundation, and we very much appreciate the senator's leadership and role in getting that across the finish line. I would say that taking a look at the regulatory approach, having a more balanced, sensible regulatory approach. I will probably defer to some mining fellow panelists up here, but taking a close look at some of our land use and mining policies that may be antiquated now, given some of the recent advances and technologies in this country. I know, as I think Pat mentioned earlier, the senators played a key role in co-sponsoring legislation to focus and invest in educational and research institutions to examine mining and the production of minerals, which will be a key component to the EV battery manufacturing process in the U.S. Lastly, I think focus on recycling from a U.S. policy perspective is critical, and I think it's a very effective tool in the meantime as we start this transition in the U.S. to clean energy. And I'm pleased to say that LG Energy Solution has made significant investment in the recycling process and the US and North America. And I think it will goes a long way in terms of securing and stabilizing the supply chain with respect to the US and North America region more broadly. So these are just a few enabling policy initiatives that I think will help create a favorable environment for market conditions and help incentivize companies, like LG Energy Solution and others to continue to invest in the United States.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, I think all of those are really important, and there's probably a number of others we can talk about offline. So turn it over to Jason with the Nature Conservancy. Jason, we'd be remiss to ignore the environmental impacts from minerals production and materials processing that we're discussing today. It's an unavoidable part of the supply chain. However, we have to assume that without a proactive vision that we're trying to develop here, for the U.S. to responsibly utilize its resources and productive capacity, that business as usual will just continue, with the vast majority of global processing flowing through China, which is, by all accounts, and as I think we all know, they do it in a much less environmentally conscious way. I think labor as well, but we can focus on the environment here than what we could achieve here in the U.S. So how can we continue to preserve our most important places and natural resources while responsibly expanding the critical mineral supply chain?
Thanks for the question. And thanks for inviting us to be on the panel today. It's an important issue and one that has to be part of this conversation. I think just to start a little higher level, as we think about this challenge, we've talked a lot about climate change and clean energy transition and what that's going to take. And that is essential because we know we're facing a climate crisis and we have to kind of go all in on addressing that. I think the flip side of that is that we're also at the same time facing a global biodiversity crisis. We know from the climate side that we've got to do a lot in a really short period of time. The IPCC says that we have, by 2030, cutting global emissions by 50%. That's a really daunting number that's going to take a ton of investment. We're going to have to transition all aspects of the economy. We're going to have to build a lot of new stuff. That is critical. We have to do it. At the same time, the UN tells us that we're losing species across the world at about 1,000 times the natural rate. That's also has to be part of this equation. And so I think as we think about this issue, we have to think about all of that collectively and how we can address those issues together, because it's going to take a wide array of solutions and all of them have to be on the table. And I think one point that is really important to remember in this conversation is that we can't pit one of these against the other. We can't put one at the expense of the other. We can't solve the climate crisis by having unacceptable impacts to nature and biodiversity. So we have to really think about those things together. And I think this issue of supply chains is right at that crossroads, is right at the intersection of those two issues, and why it's so important to think about that as we move forward. As I said, the technologies that we're going to need to address climate change are critical and are going to require a lot new manufacturing, a lot of new industrial facilities, and a lot of additional resource extraction beyond what we're doing right now. And that's part of it. But how can we do that in a way that meets those clean energy needs while avoiding some of the most sensitive places from a natural nature perspective? I think in the US, we have a huge opportunity, to get to your question, Chris, and we can really lead on this issue. And I think, how we do that is really what we should be focusing on. Just to kind of put out, some numbers, the US is not a huge producer, as I think everyone on the panel has said right now, but could be. To take one mineral critical for a clean energy transition, lithium. Less than 1% currently produced in the US, but TNC has recently done some research that showed that potential resource in the US could supply current global demand for 100 years. Obviously, demand's going to go through the roof, so it's not going to last 100 years, but that's a huge resource that we're not currently tapping. So how do we do that in a responsible way? We think there are some key principles to think about in how we do that the responsible way, how we do it right, so to speak. One is really thinking about robust and transparent planning as we move. So not every site kind of the Wild West, so to speak, in doing this, but how do we have a proactive approach to look at where are the resources, where are the sensitive environmental areas, how do we map out those places to go and do it in a thoughtful way? How do we engage local communities? Because I think that's critical, because we're not going to be able to to meet the needs that we have for the clean energy transition if there's community opposition to all of this expansion. So really engaging communities in a meaningful way from the get-go, I think, is a key part of what we have to do. And then lastly, we know not all impacts are avoidable. So really thinking through that, what we would call, the mitigation hierarchy, avoid impacts where we can, minimize them where we can, and if we can't, offset them so that we're having a net positive impact in what we do. I think that's a critical part of the solution as well. So I think, as we think about this issue, it's daunting when you look at the scale of what has to be done in a really short period of time, but it's a huge opportunity. I think the US has an opportunity to lead on these issues and really be an example to the rest of the world if we do it right and thoughtful in our approach.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I think it's really important not to think about this as a zero-sum game, like you're saying, and that we all ultimately have the same goal. And how do we get there? So I appreciate that. I want to turn back to Samantha with First Solar. So as the push for electrifying the economy expands, what risks should we be mindful of now and in the future, especially since economic security is so often synonymous with national security, and we are at a foreign relations event as well. I wanted to make sure we talked a bit about that. How can we ensure that clean energy is powered by technology that is socially and environmentally responsible?
That is the question that our generation has the answer for, or needs to develop the answer for. And by the way, Jason, you and I need to go on some sort of tour together because our talking points are going to be really similar. I think there are a few risks, and then I do have a solution that will address a lot of them. But the first one is the foreign risk, the national security risk, which is also an energy security risk. If any of you are students of history, we should all remember the long gas lines of the 70s. We've seen the headlines of what's going on in Ukraine, and more specifically in Germany, and their dependence on Russian gas and how it's led to where they are today. We have to remember that our energy security should not ever be entrusted to third countries, especially ones that are adversarial in nature on a geopolitical global stage. That's a hard lesson that Germany's going through right now. And there was a really fascinating article I read last week that walked the history of how Germany got dependent on Russian gas back in the 1970s. And there was this consequential moment I think it was actually in 1970, where they took what was supposed to be a small amount of Russian gas that then over time ballooned into a total dependency on Russia. The question I want to pose to this group is, are we in the middle of our own consequential moment that won't be realized for another 30 or 40 or 50 years on our dependency on foreign nations? And more specifically, all of the things that we're talking about here have a lot to do with the dominance of renewable energy in China. And China has gotten way out in front of every other country on their desire to own this industry. Own solar, own batteries, own EV, mining, the Belt and Road initiatives. I mean, boy, and I'll ask you this follow-up. Is this the consequential moment, or did we already pass it and we've got to go back to it? I'll give you another stat. If you think about where we are today in solar, and I mentioned, I'll give you a little bit of color here. I mentioned that we're unique in the kind of semiconductor we use. More impactful, and why I'm so happy to answer this question. We're also the only US headquartered company in the top 10 global producers of solar panels. Everybody else, 8 of the 10 are, everybody else is crystalline silicon, which has a forced labor concern that we're all working through. But 8 of those 10 are Chinese headquartered. And that in itself is not an issue, but if we take a step back and think about solar being such a fundamental part of our transition to renewable energy sources, 80% of the polysilicon used in solar is produced in China. 99% of wafers used to produce crystalline silicon solar panels are produced in China. 75% of global solar panels are produced by Chinese headquartered companies. OPEC, just to give you that perspective, governs 40% of production, 40. What are we walking ourselves into as a country? I think this is an unintended consequence that we have the criticality to solve. It takes no great leap to draw a parallel between China's dominance in renewables and your industry and my industry, and where Europe is today with Russian gas. We have to think about deploying greater scale to supply chains to stem that tide and rely on US ingenuity. The technology lives here. The innovation is from here. Let's build it here and make sure that we have not just the manufacturing capabilities here, but the raw material capabilities here so that we aren't inadvertently remaining dependent on foreign nations. You want me to keep going? I got more. I'll just hit on one more. Jason mentioned the social and environmental profile of transition. And one of the other things that is really something that I spend a lot of time staring at is because of this concentration of polysilicon and wafers in China, we look a lot at the grid that allows them to produce those elements. And just one other fun fact for First Solar, we've got the lowest carbon footprint in the industry and the fastest energy payback time. We're a member of RE100. I mean, we take this to our core to do things responsibly. If we as a country remain dependent on crystalline silicon with such substantial coal intensity in so many of its processes, and we are on a path, if we hope we're on a path to net zero by 2050, the country needs to install about 3 terawatts worth of solar by 2035 just to be on the right path. 1 terawatt of solar installed with coal intensive capabilities is equivalent to 1.3 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. And for those not in a sustainability role, that means that's about the total emissions of the entire US industrial sector in 2020. That's insanity. Why would we get there? Okay.
Well, I think we'll take your question to your rhetorical question over drinks, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of solutions there. So Vicki and Jason, I have a 2-parter for you here. Recycling materials and reclaiming waste streams from critical minerals will be an important part of meeting exploding global demand. So Jason, I'll put the first question to you. When you look across the clean energy supply chain and life cycle, where are the opportunities to address both climate and biodiversity challenges you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, thanks. So I think just going a little deeper into some of the topics I was highlighting in my first answer, this approach of recycling is really going to be critical. I think it comes back to the refrain we've heard our entire lives: reduce, reuse, recycle. I think that applies here, and we have to figure out how to apply that. So what does that mean? I think Vicki highlighted in her first answer the opportunity to reprocess waste from existing mines, from mine tailings, which may not have been economical to date, but as we look at dramatically scaling up, it should be. And we've got to go there first, because then we're not expanding the environmental impact. We're focusing where it already exists and getting more resource out of impacts that we already have. And I think that's a low-hanging fruit and a place we have to go. So that's at one end of the supply chain. At the other end, we have to look at the recycling. As we put a lot of batteries in electric vehicles, what does the end of life look like? How do we incentivize or invest in recycling that, reusing that? We're not doing that now. We're not equipped to do that. We're going to have to rapidly scale up if that's going to be part of the solution. So I think that's a prime area for focus and investment. And then I think also there's a new technology piece of this. I think there are newer technologies that may not be commercially scaled that we need to be investing in, that we need to be thinking about. One example, is a technology called direct lithium extraction, looking at geothermal brines. That's not commercially scaled technology, but it's one that may have a lower impact. Those are the kind of things that we have to be thinking about as we move through this transition. And I think critically in all of these areas, policy support is going to be really key to do that. And, I do want to also thank Senator Sinema for her work on the bipartisan infrastructure bill, because there were a lot of key investments there in all of these spaces, and that's really important. We need that, and we need to do more. And I think there's been bipartisan interest in Congress on these issues, and I think that's encouraging, but we've got to figure out what is the next phase of investments across all these areas that will help really drive this forward and scale it up.
No, that's great. And Vicki, I think Jason touched on it a little bit, but what are some of the other new technologies and processes that have emerged or that you see emerging that will allow companies like Rio Tinto, South 32 to extract less economical materials from mine waste and other low concentration deposits?
Yeah, so going back to, how do we create value out of assets where there maybe appears that maybe the value is gone, or they're very difficult ores, or ores that aren't traditionally, don't have the technology to pull the copper or critical minerals out of it. So our team has been working hard on these questions to find answers and solutions. And so pretty excited about a new technology that Rio Tinto's developed called Newton. And it has been in the making for almost 30 years. It's hard to imagine it takes that long to bring something like this online, but it's a leaching technology. So leaching has been around in the copper business for a long, long time. But leaching is always focused on copper oxide ores. And so what's left are the more tricky sulfide copper ores that are typically lower grade, much more challenging. And so at the core of Newton is a proprietary technology that can pull copper out of very low grade sulfide ores, either in old open pits, pulling it out of waste like old leach piles, tailings. So again, it is no new mining, but it is a new technology that can pull new copper out of something that is old, no new footprint. And then the other thing with the technology, it has much better environmental performance. So because we're not moving large quantities of waste rock, you're reducing your carbon footprint, less water needs, no new disturbance. So from a biodiversity standpoint, it is much better. So that's one, I think, really exciting. And we've actually done 2 investments in the United States already to get this technology to commercial scale. So we've invested in Lion Copper and Gold in Nevada. Again, an old mine, but it has lots of value that's still associated with it, just a tricky way to pull out the minerals, as well as Arizona Sonoran. So that is in Casa Grande. It's an old pit, waste rock dumps. So we're going to be using those 2 sites to make this technology, bring it to commercial scale. I just wanted to touch on, though, going back to the decarbonization and biodiversity, Rio Tinto produces all kinds of metals that are critical for the energy transition, right? Aluminum to green steel to copper and critical minerals, but it is not enough. We have to decarbonize our own operations. And so Rio Tinto's made a commitment to the market to spend $7.5 billion to reduce our carbon footprint by 50% as of 2030. And then net zero by 2050. Probably sounds like we need to get going on that a little bit sooner than later. But so where are we starting with? If we can do an underground mine at the Bingham Canyon or even Resolution Copper, battery electric vehicles are something that work pretty well in underground mines. They're flat. And so we're just about to take delivery of 2 battery electric heavy machinery, a haul truck and a loader at Kennecott. And we're going to put those to the test and trial those out. That's just one example. Partnering with utilities like SRP, right? It's based in Utah, in Arizona. And they have a very similar, path to net zero using solar largely, right? It's a great opportunity. We're already doing agreements with them to decarbonize our activities in Arizona. And then if we can do more with leaching and more with underground, we're automatically going to use less water. So what can we do with the water assets that we do have? I don't know if anyone saw the article in the Wall Street Journal about the Great Salt Lake. It is at a critical point. It is basically declined. It's half of what it used to be. And it is a critical migratory bird stopover. It is an amazing habitat biodiversity And I didn't know this until I read the article, but it's also critical to creating these storms that you get along the Wasatch Front, builds the snowpack that Salt Lake City uses for water, but also our tourism industry, skiing. So we actually partnered with the Nature Conservancy, who highlighted this to us. And we're putting 20,000 acre feet per year of water that we would otherwise use in our operations into the Great Salt Lake. It's not the solution, it's maybe a Band-Aid for a period of time, but it's, again, how do we think differently? We have these assets, we have these expertise, we have new technology. How can we save biodiversity and make it a part of all of our plans?
Thanks, Vicki. I think it's important to go even deeper than what we're talking about here into the decarbonization of the entire supply chain. I think that is complex, something to follow up on. The last question before we turn to the audience is for Patrick and LG. So beyond the terrible humanitarian consequences, the war in Ukraine has also hit global supply chains hard, as Samantha touched on a bit, both because of production impairment in the contested areas and political sanction on Russian suppliers. Russia and Ukraine combined play an important role in the aluminum supply chain, along with nickel, copper, in addition to niche materials that go into semiconductors and other parts of the battery supply chain. What do you think are the long-term issues we should be thinking about to rethink our global supply chains and still achieve U.S. clean energy goals?
Thank you, Chris. Tough one. I think everybody up here already answered the question for me, right? No, I mean, it's a critical question, obviously. I mean, it just, as we've seen with recent events and you know, not just what's going on in the world with respect to the last couple of years of COVID or with Russia and Ukraine and the broader supply chain issues. I think every industry, not just for, you know, the battery manufacturing industry, but no industry can be too reliant on a single source or a link in the supply chain. You know, LG Energy Solution is just, you know, one piece of or one component, I guess, of the value chain here. But in terms of longer term issues, you know, I think, as my fellow panelists have said today, I think the key piece of the puzzle is addressing raw materials, sourcing, and rare earth vulnerabilities. Again, encouraging to hear some great solutions, great work that's being done here in the U.S. on that already. You know, and Chris, you know, not just with respect to Russia and semiconductors, but, you know, as Samantha already elegantly said, it's no secret that, you know, that China, it's impossible basically to manufacture electric vehicle batteries without China. You know, nearly 80% of materials are processed in China at some point. You know, and let's just think about where the demand will, you know, is going. Demand for rare earth materials, minerals will only increase, you know, by a magnitude of 4 to 8 over the coming, you know, decades. I think Pat said that earlier. The industry, you know, the world needs more industry ready rare earth materials to de-risk the supply chain vulnerabilities that we're talking about here today. So, you know, LG Energy Solution obviously recognizes that, and, you know, I think we will continue, like I said earlier, how can we continue to diversify and localize our supply chain? And I think it's going to take, you know, partners like and folks and the value chain like we have here today, and some of those very innovative solutions that they propose. So in terms of a policy perspective, obviously there are tons of things that need to be done, as you already alluded to, Chris. But, you know, stepping back, and I think broader picture here with respect to long-term solutions, what should we be looking at, especially when it comes to U.S. policy for the long term? You know, I think focusing on the workforce is a critical issue. And obviously, there have been significant investments made recently, but continuing to invest in public-private partnerships. LG Energy Solution has partnerships with many universities and technical schools around our manufacturing facilities, and hopes to be able to continue to build on those relationships in Arizona in the future. And then in terms of, I would just say another big issue for the long term is the U.S. government's investment and research and development with respect to these issues. That these are kind of midstream, issues in the broader value chain, but I think, making sure that we are putting the appropriate amount of resources and continuing to invest in research and development, along with industry, obviously, will be critical.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. That's a good reminder that the supply chain actually goes to people as well on workforce training. And questions, we're going to go a little bit over, so sorry, everyone. We'll get to the bar soon. But if anyone in the audience has a question, yes, do we have a mic?
Hi, I'm Sue Ritz, and I'm with Vets Forward. I wanted to thank the senator for supporting this initiative. Also, there's a lot of vilification of China, and rightly so. However, the process technology that exists for REEs is centralized in China, and this is where the process engineers have the most experience. Is anybody reaching out to those engineers to see if they're interested in working in a technological back and forth? Because that process technology does not exist in the United States currently. Thank you.
Nikki's probably the best position for that one.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll say from our perspective, we do produce critical minerals, right, as a byproduct of copper. One we're producing right now is tellurium. We're on the way to building a rhenium plant. So those technologies do exist. The other ones, we probably have about another 13 critical minerals that we could pull out. And we are actually collaborating with the Department of Energy. So they've got a science and engineering technology, right? All the national labs. And there is technology that exists. It is making sure that you can suit it to your specific mineralogy and process and other residuals that sit in the waste. So while, yes, there is going to be an element of technology and R&D, I think we can do it. And that's actually what's the most exciting thing about this, is sort of bringing back this American innovation and technology and can-do attitude. We can produce it, we have it. Recyclers also do it. So there are recycling companies that also are in the United States. They also have they're not pulling out all of the same type of minerals, but they do have that technology. So I think it goes back to partnering together with other recyclers, with the Department of Energy and the United States government, and our own expertise. We can certainly, not only in the US, we're a global company, so we have R&D research that's happening all over the world.
But the practical knowledge resides in China, especially for REEs and those refining those products.
Well, the knowledge resides in many cases with smelters. So if you have a smelter and a refinery, you know these sort of waste streams that you produce, you know the minerals that are in them. There are actually technologies to pull them out.
REEs are not a smelter product, they are a hydrometallurgical product.
Right, but you get them. REEs can come from the dust and the slag that comes out of smelters. So we actually make some of that right away. So there's about 4 REEs that are typically associated with smelter slag. There are also REEs that are associated with tailings, with both. So I'm not saying that it's not like off the shelf right away, because you have to adapt existing technology to your specific process and your specific wastes. But I think we can do it.
So you don't think we need to partner with anybody in China to bring the process engineers together so they can build the plants and do it the right way?
We've done it already. I think I just take tellurium for one example, right? We've built the plant. We've partnered with 5N Plus and First Solar and the United States to build the plant and produce the tellurium. So I think we can do it with the rest, yes. And it's a great opportunity, right, for PhDs and students and that kind of innovation, we can do it.
Okay, well, I'm being told that it's time to head to the reception. So if you have any other questions, our panelists will be here. And I want to thank you guys again all for joining. I think this was really helpful. Thank you.